Alright, I think it's time for me to wrap up on Cyberpunk. Sure, there are some more topics I could cover, like my dislike of the you just can't win style romance between Johnny and Rogue, or the fact that they crafted an insightful, lovable character like Takamura only to cast him as a loyal dog in the end, or even the fact that nothing you do ever matters in Night City, and many of the main story options are incredibly linear. After 160 hours of gameplay, here are my final thoughts on the game. There are times when the story in Cyberpunk is just freaking amazing. I remember going beyond the Black Wall for the first time, being put in that tub of ice water like I was participating in Flatliners. Actually, I don't think that's the right movie, but I can't remember which one it was that had the tubs. Oh, whatever, it has nothing to do with it. And going where nobody had ever gone before, meeting Alt, who was like this big digital god, it sort of reminded me of how cool watching The Lawnmower Man was as an 11-year-old back in the 90s. It was amazing. It gave me goosebumps, and I was so excited about the prospects and how the story would be affected. And getting into the Basilisk tank for the first time was also pretty awesome, even if the handling was kind of bad once you were driving, and there was that bug that made it so you couldn't leave the tank if you actually test drove it before the mission. But the story was told in a good way most of the time. The big problem was that it was touted as having choices, diverging paths that would change the story, and instead we got a mostly linear game that felt more like watching a movie. Like you were just going along for the ride, making completely arbitrary choices that didn't affect much. I call it the linear illusion when the game makes it look like you have a lot of choices when there actually aren't any, or the choices are not very meaningful. I think back to Dragon Age Inquisition a lot when I think about the linear illusion, because one of the main choices of the game, to side with the Templars or the mages, had little to no impact on the game. It literally just meant Red Lyrium mages or Red Lyrium Templars, both sided with Corypheus against you. In short, it was kind of lame, especially after some of the massive choices you had from Dragon Age Origins that you could actually follow through on, get a unit as a result for the final battle, and see the ending credits of the game affected. A lot of Cyberpunk feels just like that, and while at first you might not notice it, any kind of delving into the story, or even trying an alternate path, will make it very clear. The build-up and conclusion to the heist is a huge example of how nothing you choose will actually affect anything. Squeeze out Dex with Evelyn to get that hefty 50% cut out of the sale of the biochip? Nope, doesn't matter, doesn't affect anything. You don't even get paid. Tell Dex Evelyn tried to screw him? Doesn't matter. I almost thought there would be a scene where he brought her in and made an example of her, but the choice didn't seem to matter at all, just a different line of dialogue with no real effect. There are many bottlenecks like that where nothing you do will change it, no matter what choice you make, no matter what you do. Given I was expecting this huge variety of outcomes, I was a bit disappointed by the railroad job. And the disappointment doesn't end there. The thing that let me down the absolute most was just how careless CDPR was with their cast of characters and even their paying customers by extension. They took interesting characters like Evelyn Parker and just tossed them aside in the most gratuitously brutal manner possible, like massive overkill. And then they have characters like Takamura that they spend so much time building up. I mean, seriously, you probably get to know him the best of anyone in this game besides maybe Johnny. There is a definite friendship between you guys, made more apparent if you pick the nicer options with dialogue. And in the end, they simplified him so much that it was just pathetic. There's actually a line from Johnny that summarizes exactly what they did with Takamura. Remember when you guys are eating that nasty yakitori and Johnny comes out and says this?
He's a well-trained dog. Needs orders, that's all.
That is the whole shtick. That's what they did with Takamura. So in the end, even though you've legit been to hell and back with this guy, doing the absolute impossible with him of reaching Hanako, they just went with, he's a loyal dog and that's all he'll ever be. That's bullshit. Like, oh, people can't change, they're just one-trick ponies incapable of complex emotion. What a bleak frickin' opinion on humanity. And then there's Johnny, who you become incredibly close to as well. And in any ending where you return to your body, you just kind of shoot him into cyberspace like some kind of unwanted brain loogie, only to find out that you're just going to die anyway. So it was for nothing. And that's my problem with this game. It's too much of you do everything for nothing. Everyone makes excuses for it too, saying it's supposed to be dark, brutal, and pointless. The source material was dark and brutal. Have you guys ever even looked at the source material? Like, let's take a look, shall we? After I got out of the army, I had this problem. I was good at what I did, but no one was hiring. I mean, what do you do when you're a highly trained killer with a background in demolitions? Read the want ads? After a few months on the street, I got into a dust down with a local booster lord. I flatlined him and went back to my drink. Within 10 minutes, the recruiter from Militech came up to me and dropped a business card. Now I'm a company man. I mean, come on, this isn't frickin' brutal. And how about this one from Carrie Uridine, who's actually in the game? I always knew what I had to do. It was really obvious. There were these scum out there who were messing with the world. They were killing people, raping the land, and lying in our faces when we caught them. So I decided I had to put the heat on them and make them sweat. That's why I became a rocker boy. Does this look as brutal as what happened to Evelyn? I mean, really, this shit came out in the 80s. The idea of brutality in the 80s was about what we would consider PG-13 by today's standards, and yet we get Cyberpunk in here that is basically rated NC-17 and completely over the top. The worst I've heard from this supposedly brutal world is that they had this carbon death plague in one of the expansions called Cyber Generation, where everyone over 20 died and the kids under 20 lived or changed into mutants. Sure, that's kinda messed up, but how the heck is it any different from X-Men? I mean, we don't all sit around talking about how brutal and dark the X-Men were. Now, do we? Fuck's sake, I still remember the kids' cartoon from the 90s that was always on. And I'd also argue that a lot of the source material seems to espouse at least a sort of hope. They literally talk about how the US is making a comeback and the cyberpunk revolution is supposed to help change things. But I don't need to be 100% on board with something or even totally against it either. I'm comfortable living in the gray area in between, being able to say, hey, there were some things about this game I liked, and some things I didn't like. In the end, the sheer amount of disappointment from CDPR's choices and my lack of ability to change it with my own choices left me with a sour taste in my mouth, and it also left me feeling pretty depressed, which is something I don't really want out of a game. But hey, at least they gave me Gladys.
Here come the test results. You are a horrible person. I'm serious. That's what it says. A horrible person. We weren't even testing for that.
Please tell me you found her here too. So I'm going to say goodbye to Cyberpunk. Hey man, it was fun, kinda. But I'm moving on to greener pastures, where I have a tadpole stuck in my head. Why the heck are game devs so intent on sticking shit in my head? I guess we're right back to the quest of trying to find a way to get the biochip, the tadpole out. And even if not, at least I get to spend my time with my hot vampire lover while I'm waiting to die. See, CDPR, you could have made your game so much better if there was a Takamura 6-month plan. Just saying. Now I'm just waiting for patch 4 before I hop back into Baldur's Gate 3, and I've also been playing Larian's Divinity Original Sin 2, which is freaking awesome. I'm in Act 2 right now and working my way through the story, wondering which guy I'm going to pick for a romance. I'm legit walking around with a harem consisting of the Red Prince, Fane, and Ifan. So far it's a tight match between the Red Prince and Ifan, although I did educate Fane on human mating rituals. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later.
I let you survive this long because I was curious about your behavior. Well, you've managed to destroy that part of me. A bitter, unlikable loner whose passing shall not be mourned.